Welcome everyone to today's Tech Talk on optimizing testing processes to improve software quality. We are glad to have you here for this valuable session where we will discuss ways to make our testing processes better and ensure our software is of the highest quality. During the session, please feel free to add your questions in the comment section, and we will have a Q&A session at the end where Olga will answer your questions and share more insights. Now, let's give a warm welcome to our today's speaker, Olga Grachova.
Hello, colleagues. Now I'm on stage, so let's start. Today we are going to discuss the topic named optimizing testing processes to improve software quality. And before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Olga Grachova, and I'm a lead software testing engineer. I'm almost 9 years in software testing and combining both functional and automation testing. My projects, I have been working on different projects, and my projects were related mainly to financial and legal domain. And currently, I'm located in the Netherlands. I also would like to say that I publish my articles on Medium platform, and I encourage you to join me here because there I provide my experience on various software testing related topics, and I really hope that those would be helpful for your professional development. And let's get started. Today, we're going to discuss how to adjust testing processes, and to be able to perform these activities, we should start with asking ourselves two main questions. The first one, what is the current situation on the project? Then we should analyze what are the most frequent pains, issues, problems, bottlenecks, challenges. And only after that we will be able to see how can we address those issues and what can be done to improve software quality. And let's start with the first question, what is the current situation? In order to understand what is going on, we need to consider all different sources of input. And among those, I would say that we specifically need to start talking to stakeholders. By saying stakeholders, I mean all the involved parties. It can be the QA manager or QA lead, the development team lead, product owners, project managers. It can also be the input from the shared sources from, let's say, application store or from Google platform. We can see what our end users write and which information is valuable for us. Also, we can consider our testing processes and what we have on each stage of the development process. Uh, Also, analyzing bugs can be a valuable input because going to the bug descriptions, analyzing the root cause can be very, very valuable and a great source of information. And of course, we cannot ignore metrics. Metrics is something that allows us to see the point A and which specifically metrics can be used. We can use variety of metrics. I mentioned here some of them, but of course it can be project specific and you can be creative. But let's consider the ones which I thought maybe the most valuable ones. First is defect containment. It's one of the most important metrics because it shows the quality of our testing efforts. And ideally, it should be more than 95% because it means that the majority of bugs were found during testing, not by end user. Other metrics are connected to a number of issues, and there can be different allocation of issues, but I think the most interesting ones is number of defects by status. So we have a big number of open issues, or we have a big number of fixed but not yet tested issues, or number of defects by testing types. So let's say we have a big amount of regression issues, it means something for us, right? And also a big number of defects by priority in certain area or in certain feature or in certain component. It's also an important information. Also consider test coverage, test case coverage. So what we have here, it means that the number, well, not actually the number, but the percentage of the requirements which were covered by these cases. Ideally, we should have full coverage or more than 90% of requirements should be covered. So that's a good metric for us. Also consider defect density. It means that the number of defects we have per one requirement. It also can be a number of defects per line of code, but for quality engineers, I think, especially for manual quality engineers, it's primarily related to requirements. Also, there is such metric as new feature and regression bugs amount balance, which means that ideally we would strive to higher amount of new feature bugs rather than the regression bugs. And this metric is important source of information. Also, the important metric is test execution metrics, such as number of defects or number of test cases which were passed already, which are failed, which are blocked for whatever reasons, which are not yet passed. And of course, we strive to pass the whole amount of these cases. So ideally, we strive to higher values of this metric. And two more metrics related mostly to bugs, I would say. So the decline rate shows the amount of bugs, the percentage of bugs which we decline because it's not actually a bug or whatever other reasons, but it's not good to spend a lot of efforts for creating bugs which are not really a bugs, while it's not good to not to create bugs which should be bugs. So you have to keep it in mind and strive to find the best approach for this. And one more metric is reopen rate, which means that, for example, we have some bugs and they were fixed, but then we have to reopen them because, for example, some scenarios were missed and some corner case were missed, and it looks like the bug should go to the bug cycle one more time. And after we have considered what is the current situation on the project and with which metrics can we measure it. Let's go to the analyzing what are the most frequent problems. So it's the second block. And there are various approach how to understand how to brainstorm what are the most tricky issues or pains on our project. But what I would like recommend considering is looking into this from the perspective of testing activities during the development lifecycle. So if we go through the development life cycle, we have requirements analysis stage, test design, some environment configuration stage, test execution, reporting, and I also specifically pointed out the communication, which is not actually a stage, but it's an important block which is part of the whole development life cycle. So it's worth be mentioned here as well. And let's start from the first stage, requirements analysis, um, and brainstorm which problems do we have during this stage. First of all is lack of documentation. So it means that we don't have any requirements, which is obviously an issue. But except of this, we may have a problem when we have requirements, but they are not complete, or it's not enough of the amount of the requirements or amount of the information we have. Other situation when we have documentation, but this documentation is outdated, so we cannot rely on this. We all know that we might have up-to-date documentation, but it's not. It's of a poor quality. So we have some discrepancies, some unclear moments. We have to do some activities to investigate, analyze, gather some missing parts. So bad requirements is definitely an issue. Sometimes we have too complex requirements, which means that, let's say we have some complex domain and you have to know a lot of things, and it's difficult to know everything if you are not a part of this domain. So you may have some requirements, but it's not obvious for you. So you have a lot of things to clarify and to gain a lot of knowledge. Other issue is lack of stakeholder involvement. What I mean here is that sometimes you have that person who you reach with your questions, but it's difficult to gain the answers from him or her, or there would be weeks when you're waiting for some response. So that's an issue. Also, an issue when we have requirements and we started working on them, and then the requirements are being changed. We understand that we work in agile environment, but having those changes after the approval, it's always a pain. And one more issue connected to requirements is a lack of prioritization. If we have started working on something and then something is popped up and something with a higher priority is also always a hurry, and that's not a good case. And having discussed all those problems, what can we do to address those? Let's discuss what are the possible solutions to address those issues. So first of all, we should define who is responsible for the requirements. Their role, the projects are different and there can be different roles, but ideally, we should always find a person who's responsible, who we can reach to get the answers. It can be business analysts, it can be product owners, it can be some consultants, subject matter experts, but we should always have such people. Other solution is specify and embrace the concept of definition of ready. It's somewhat of a checklist of the criteria which we should follow to take some user stories into work. And example of such criteria can be The acceptance criteria are present. We don't have any open questions. All the designs are touched and so on and so forth. Other solution is to use some requirements management tools. There can be various, for example, Jira or Azure DevOps or many others, but the idea is that we can have various discussions in emails during the calls, but it's always good to have some space where we can have the final version of the requirements, and that's a good case to have the requirements management tool. Other suggestion is create requirements visual representation. It's a good. There is a good proverb that it's better to see one time rather than hear 10 times. So if we have some visual representation of the UI window fields, or some if we have some complex workflows and there would be a scheme showing which process should be followed by other, or what are the changing of states, it's good to have them presented in some visual way. Other solution for our requirements issues is to conduct meetings with the stakeholders. So sometimes we have a lot of questions to the about the requirements to the stakeholders, and we know that mostly they're busy people, and sometimes it's easier just to set up a call, and during this call address all the unclear moments, and during this conversation sometimes we have the answers for the questions which were not actually in our list at the beginning. So it's good to have something being discussed on the call, or ideally on site if that's possible. Also, if we have some issues with the stakeholders availability, we should ping them. For example, we write an email, we can ping them later in Slack, or again in email, but we should think of some escalation path. What can we do if we are not able to reach the stakeholders for our answers? And after all these discussions, after all the discussions in different threads or channels, we should finalize our decisions in the final version of the requirement, and better in the requirement management tool. So how is better to organize this? Have some user story, and don't just attach the email threads where we have discussed something, because in a month you won't be able to recall what was that, or don't have the long threads in the comments. You may have the comments threads, but it's better to update the final requirements with the final decision. It can be a QA, it can be some special person who's making these updates, but everything should be reflected in its final version. And before starting work on implementation, make sure that you are fulfilling all the criteria from the definition already. And it's not enough just to have this definition already. We know that usually QAs are being, or not only QAs, but the development team may be pushed, like, please start working on development. We will clarify some questions later on. It's always good to stay within your boundaries and resolve all the questions, and only then start the development. It should be a part of the working machine. And like I said, we work in an agile environment, and we embrace some changes. But ideally, we shouldn't modify the requirement after all the questions were resolved and the requirements were approved. If we have some breaking changes, it should be the second version of the story, or we should get back to the beginning of the project, finalize the modification, and then start the development. And what is also important, we should allocate some time to review the requirements and keep them up to date. It's time-consuming activity, I understand, but it's the source of everything, so it's good to spend time and reflect all the changes we have. Now let's go to the next stage, and it's test case design. And which issues do we have on this stage? One of the issues is no test cases or no checklists. Let's say we are starting the project, or we have been working with other vendor and we have some legacy from this vendor. So we may have may have problem when we don't have any documentation for testing, like no test cases, or we have test cases but they're of a poor quality. So sometimes there are long test cases with variety of steps, which uh, seems to be endless, or we have test cases and it's not clear, some information is missing and you have it but you cannot execute it, or you are missing expected results. Also a problem if that there are some critical scenarios missing, so we have some test coverage gaps. Sometimes test case creation process is very time consuming. It can be related to the tool because it is not very user friendly, or it can be just due the project specific. But this process of test cases creation can be very time consuming. Sometimes the issue is that the test cases are in different format or in different structure, and let's say the team members are creating different kind of test cases, and when we have regression and switching between the switching, so I'm executing test cases from some other team members and vice versa, there may be questions or the structure can be different, so that's an issue. And the issue can be lack of domain knowledge. It's especially noticeable if we have some complex domain areas, or we have some applications um, which are being developed for dozens of years, and you are very eager to create good test cases, but you don't know all the details, and it's a problem. And sometimes you have these cases, and there are a lot of them, but they are outdated, or there can be duplicates, or they are no longer relevant. And you have to keep them in mind, maybe include them into regression, and in the end you feel that you start executing it, but you understand that this case is bad. So that's an issue. And how can we deal with these problems? How can we address them? First of all, I encourage to use requirements traceability metrics. What is it? It is somewhat of a table where we have the requirements and corresponding test case covering each of the requirements. And ideally, we should have one test case per one requirement. It can be several test cases for the requirement, but we shouldn't have requirements gaps, requirements coverage gaps, I would say so. Also, we should consider having templates for the test cases. So I encourage teams to sit, brainstorm, and agree on some format which will be followed within the teams. And also, it's a valuable practice to have some test cases peer review, so we can have let's say test case preparation, where one team member is creating test cases and the other QA is reviewing them, or business analytic is analysts reviews the test cases. And if we are spending a lot of time for test cases creation, let's say you need 2 hours to create or to execute this case, and you spent 1 hour to create this test case, it's better to consider using checklists instead of test cases creation, because creating test documentation shouldn't be that taking that much time. And what I also suggest, spend time to review existing test case these cases and keep them up to date and make sure that there are no duplicates, there are no outdated test cases. On one of my projects, we had such a practice where, um, well, initially the situation was that there were around 4,000 of these cases, and once we started reviewing them, it was the case when we didn't have critical functionalities covered, but we had a lot of outdated and no longer necessary test cases, and we spent time on a regular basis, and our team members had some assigned areas uh, which we reviewed and make sure that the test cases coverage was efficient, and uh, we removed outdated test cases, and it activity really paid off. And I also encouraged to conduct knowledge transfer sessions, some trainings, workshops, maybe create some knowledge base where you put all the necessary knowledge for the project, for the domain, because it will be available for other team members or for future team members joining to the project. Let's go to the environment configuration stage. And which issues do we have here? The first issue is delays in building test environments or waiting for the new build deployment. It can be time consuming. Other case when we have inconsistent test and production environments. We might have case when we spot the issue during the testing, but there is no, it's not actually a bug because it's not reproducible on production because of different configuration, but it's not that bad case compared to the situation when we do not spot the issue on test environment because there is no any, but there would be an issue on production, and this is the reason of not consistent test and production environments. And another issue is environmental downtimes if we have to do some testing activities but the environment is down. And what can we do for those issues? How can we address them? The solutions can be the following. We should consider setting up CI/CD environments and automate our deployment processes in those pipelines. Also, we should consider maintaining test environment, which should be the exact same environment configuration and everything like in production. So it should be test environment should mimic the production environment. And other solution for addressing environment downtimes, we should have the clear escalation path. We should communicate any blockages immediately. Maybe there can be some guidelines what can the tester do in order to unblock him or herself, or if there is no action items possible from the tester's end, we should switch to some other project activities which is not blocked, maybe create some documentation or something else, but don't just sit and wait until the environment issue is resolved. And after that, we go to one of the corner stages of testing, is test execution itself. And which problems do we have here? And first issue is bugs, and the issue actually when we have production bugs or we have bugs found during testing but at the later stages, and the costs of finding and fixing those bugs are obviously higher rather than we spot them at the beginning. Other issue if we have a big amount of bugs in some certain area or some feature or in some component. Sometimes we have a big amount of bugs overall in our backlog in different areas, but still it's too many bugs. Sometimes we have ineffective testing strategy. Of course, we may have no test strategy which is bad case, of course, obviously, but sometimes we have some test strategy and we somewhat rely on that, but this test strategy is outdated, not longer effective, and we rely on something which is not really up to date or not yet effective. Other problem is that we sometimes we have a lot of time spent on manual regression testing, and it is an issue because usually, testing is the activity that is happening at the end of the release life cycle, and usually we are already somewhat behind of schedule or tight on schedule, and we have some testing, and usually testers are being pushed to be able to fit into timelines, and spending a lot of time on manual testing here, it's usually somewhat of challenging. Two more problems are mostly connected to automation testing, and those are unstable tests which are failing for no particular reason. I mean, there is no actual bugs, but we cannot rely on those tests because they fail or pass randomly. And it can be the reason because of the locators for the UI automation, for example, are broken, or the scripts themselves are not really good. And we have to spend a lot of time to maintenance those test cases, to review the analysis and understand whether it's a test issue or whether it's a real bug, and it costs some time. And one more issue is QA member productivity or skill level. We have different projects. Sometimes the environment is quite rapid, and we need to provide some certain level of productivity, and it can be an issue for the project. So, what can we do in these situations? How can we address the challenges? First, again, set up CI/CD pipeline. I think it's somewhat of a silver bullet for many cases, and by this, I encourage to create test cases, some automation test suite, which is part of the CI/CD and is run on each deployment and provides rapid feedback on what's the quality of the application. Other solution is shift left testing. What is it? It's the concept of starting testing activities as soon as possible. So we have some static testing during the requirements analysis, and when the development is started, QAs already starting the test cases design. They also define which test cases can be covered on unit levels and provide this information to developers, which scenarios should be covered on component level, and which can be done by testers on scenario level, which can be automated. So the idea is to start testing activities as soon as possible. And other approach is risk-based testing. What does it mean? It means that we need to discover high impact or how critical areas, and put all our efforts and attention on those areas, or on areas of a high risk. What is more, we need to analyze missed defects, no matter which defects are production or found during our testing phase. We need to analyze each and every defect and try to find the root cause for it, whether it was missed requirement, whether it was some configuration issue. Try to find the real reason of this bug. And it's not just enough to analyze this, it's important to make some adjustments to the testing strategy. So if we have some requirements missed, then we should improve test case coverage, add test cases to cover some specific test cases. If we miss some testing types, let's say integration testing, we should make sure that we address it in our testing strategy. If we have a big number of issues, like it was mentioned as a problem, we should consider making a stabilization phase where we stop our testing efforts and have somewhat of a step back and make sure we make some fixes, because it means that if we have a big number of bugs, most probably the application is not yet very stable and somewhat raw. So let's do some additional development work and then continue with our testing. If we spend a lot of time on manual execution, of course, it's good to consider automation, the regression tests, but it's not good to just to automate each and every test. It should be an incremental approach. We should prioritize the test cases which we consider to be like the most important ones, P1 test cases, automate them, have the feedback, and then reiterate. So do the second stage and automate something more. And this time which we saved by running part of the tests by automation, we should allocate to exploratory testing, because I think you would agree with me that when you test the application closer to the release, namely at the regression stage, you have much more knowledge rather than you start new feature testing and you have less knowledge because you're at the very beginning. And it's good to except of passing the test cases, it's good to have some creative testing and perform some exploratory testing and check some additional flows, not really basic flows, and be curious and open-minded to follow some additional scenarios. It's always a good strategy. How can we address the issue with the unstable test cases, the unstable automation test cases? We can add rules for static code analysis, make them more strict, I would say, or improve our test code review process. Maybe add someone from other team, maybe increase the number of required approvals for the chicken. And also, we should consider trainings, some knowledge transfer sessions for the newcomers, maybe some mentoring body to improve the skill set level of the team members and achieve a certain level of productivity. That was the solutions for test execution stage. And now let's go to the next stage, the reporting. So once we conducted our testing, we need to provide information, what is the current state of the application, what is its quality. And the problems we have here that the reporting can be very time consuming. I remember there was one of the project and I was spending like a day for creating test result report, which was somewhat not productive. So I had to deal with this issue. Sometimes we have a case when we have too many reports, we don't need that much, or we have not enough reports. And sometimes we have reports with a good frequency, but they're not informative. We have the report, but what can we do with that? It's just a report for the sake of report, which is not good. How can we deal with those problems? First, consider automating this test results reports creation. Sometimes we have tools which are able to create dashboards, and some information, for example, during the regression testing, can be just showed on these dashboards. It will be up to date on a daily basis, and it costs us nothing to create such report. Other resolution can be to agree with the customer on the format of these cases. which information he or she is expected, and how often. And I would highly recommend consider what is the purpose of test result reports creation. It's the providing information. What is the current quality? Where we are, and are we okay to go to production or not yet? What are the impediments and all of this? So what can help us provide this information? We should provide information about the current test status. What is the number of these cases which already passed, which are not yet passed, which are failed or blocked for whatever reason? What is the current quality? I mentioned here the number of open bugs or bugs in certain area, but you can rely on other metrics which we discussed at the beginning of the talk. And all of those different metrics can be available to provide the information about the current quality. And it's not enough just to provide those numbers and that's it. $5 in production, is it good or not good? $5 minor priority bugs, is it a good number of bugs or not? You are a specialist, so I encourage you to provide your own assessment of the quality and provide your input. How you evaluate the current quality based on the numbers you see? What are the problems you currently see? What are the risks you see? And how you would suggest dealing with those risks? Because based on your report, customer will make some, or customer or project management will make some decisions, and the report should be informative enough to be able to provide those, to be able to generate those decisions. That's what I wanted to say. And now let's switch to communication. Which problems do we have during the communication stage? I think the most important problem is, or the most common problem is miscommunication. We may have different expectations within the customer side and the development team, or between the team members. Other issue is when we have unclearly defined roles and responsibilities. For example, who is responsible for environment deployment, whether it's a DevOps or developers or a QA. And there may be different cases when people has different vision who is responsible for what. If we have no responsible person, you cannot rely on the result. Other problem is when you have redundant meetings. We know that in agile environment we have a lot of meetings, but they should not be 100% of your time. And when we have poorly structured meetings, there may be long discussions for nothing, and you spend a lot of time, and the meetings can be too long, so you don't have time to perform your testing activities because you just have calls one after another. And how can we deal with those problems? How can we address them? In order to avoid miscommunication, I would suggest having daily meetings, but they should be within the allocated time frame. So let's say for daily stand-ups, we have 15 minutes, and within these times, we just need to briefly provide our status. And in case some detailed discussion is needed, just stay after the call and only within the necessary amount of people and discuss what's needed. No need to waste all team members' time to be part of the discussion, which is not really necessary for everyone. Also, there should be someone who is checking that meetings is staying within the allocated time. So there should be hard stop, because if there is no such practice, you would definitely fall behind the schedule, like almost always. And I encourage you to get prepared for the meetings, because if you have a number of questions prepared in advance, there are high chance that the conversation will be more structured and within the time schedule. I also encourage to send meeting follow-ups because it helps. First, it helps to avoid miscommunication. There might be discussions, but in the end, there would be some written notes, and people will be able to check whether it corresponds. The results of those meetings corresponds to what actually is being discussed, and also it helps other people who were not part of these meetings just to briefly check what was agreed. And other suggestion is clearly define the roles and responsibility. In this case, you would be able to avoid this misunderstanding what who's responsible for what. So it should be clearly defined within the team. And I think this is all for the solutions. And we are going closer to the end of the talk. Let's briefly discuss what has been discussed during it. We discussed how to assess current situation, which input can we use, and which metrics can be useful for this. We also analyzed the existing problems during the testing stages, and based on those problems, we uh, brainstormed which solutions can we implement in order to address those problems. And in the end, by adjusting those testing activities, by addressing the problems, we can improve the software quality. So I am done with my talk and I'm ready for the questions.
Yeah, I hope you found the discussion valuable and gained some useful insights into improving your testing processes and software quality. And thank you, Olga. Now we will move on to the Q&A session. Please don't hesitate to add your questions in the comment section, and we will be happy to address them. So let's start with the first question. Could you share an example from your experience where optimizing the testing process significantly improved software quality?
Um, Let me think. I think yes, I can share some example, but it's not a matter of one single improvement. It's a matter of a number of improvements which paid off in the end. I joined the project, which was somewhat on a R&D uh, like resource and development stage, and the processes were not really properly set up because it was the beginning of project, and um, many things was not really correctly set up. But the development already has been started, and there was certain information about the current quality, about the number of bugs, the defect containment, and everything. And actually, what I have been just told you, it's the mind map of what I was doing. So I somewhat went through the current situation and see. And yes, what was done? It was the CI/CD which was done. It was the risk-based testing which was incorporated. The requirements, the definition of ready, which I deeply encourage you to follow, and the exploratory testing, um, environment configuration. There were discussions with the DevOps, and yes, at the end, well, it's not really the end, but because it's not yet completed. But I would say that after several months, when we reached the second release, I checked the numbers, and the defect containment was better, the ratio of the regression and new feature bugs. So that's an example.
Thank you for sharing your experience, and let's switch to the next question. How do you know that the quality of a software is improved or has improved? I mean the metrics.
Um, okay. Um, I would say that you cannot improve something when you don't measure the situation beforehand. So, like I said at the beginning, well, of course, you can do some modifications, but you won't be able to understand whether it was worth it or not, whether it did some particular improvement or not. So let's say you have defect containment 82%, which is which means that you have a number of production issues, and that's the reason why it's relatively low. And you improve your requirements analysis status. You um, do some actions which I don't want to to repeat again, but you do all these steps and make some modifications, and you have the second release cycle, or the second release cycle, or the third release cycle, and you see that after the second release cycle, you have the defect containment, let's say 88%. So it's higher. You have the information that your point B is different from the point A, and mm, the number of bugs which were found by the QA team, not by the end user. Then you might make some further adjustments, and after that you see the defect containment, for example, 92%. So it's 10% more, and you can say that you improved your quality in this way. Or for example, you have some big amount in the certain area. Let me provide some example more closer to the real life. For example, you have some online shop and you have a number of issues connected to the online purchase, something with the orders, and this is the certain area which is quite buggy. You have a 50 bugs in this area, and then you do some actions and you measure the results in a certain amount of time, and you see that you change something and the number of bugs in this particular area is lower, let's say 20, because you increase the test cases coverage, or you provide some knowledge transfer sessions with the BA, and he or she provided some information on how it's supposed to work. And yeah, that's the real example. How can you obviously see that the software is the quality of software is improved? So, and answering the question more specifically, I would highly recommend using first the metrics which I mentioned at the beginning. I think they're able to provide very valuable input. Yeah.
Thank you, Olga, for so detailed answer. And we have a few more questions. The next one is, how do you identify and prioritize areas for improvement in a testing process, especially in case of tight deadlines?
Um, let me think a little bit.
So probably it's a common situation for test leads, for especially managers. And
Yeah. I'm thinking that it's good to understand tight deadlines. I'm thinking how to better answer this question, because tight deadlines can be in general because the project itself is quite rapid, or it can be tight deadlines because you're close to the release, and um, the quality is not good and you have to do something, and everything is on fire. Let it be the second case. Let's start probably from the second case. I think that you need your first priority is just to find, well, to make sure that you find most critical bugs and don't let them slip to production. And in order to do so, you need to find the most risky areas and apply risk-based testing on this stage, because that's the most quick fix. If you are close to the release and you have a big number of bugs and everything, and you are very tight on schedule, just implement risk-based testing and pay special attention to the high importance areas. If it's tight deadlines on in general on the project, it's a different situation, because you need to consider some baseline improvements which may affect the quality. So you can be more fundamental wise, and I would recommend to look at the requirements analysis stage, because it's the beginning, and properly done the first stage would increase the overall software quality. So the answer is a bit different depending on the situation.
Thank you. It was quite insightful. And the next question is, what are some common challenges you faced when introducing improvements, and how did you overcome them?
Mm, I think it's one of the challenges for me specifically is when you have the environment and it's difficult to implement the challenges per se. I mean, you know that something is not really efficient, and you need to do some modifications, but the things are settled for a long time in this particular way, and you need to gain some certain level of respect, and I would say that real improvement cases that you demonstrate help you to to deal with this. So this is the challenge, when you know that there are some improvements needed, but the context and the environment can be somewhat rigid, or I would say, and you need to argue to provide your point of view, to provide your arguments, the metrics and everything, to persuade the team members, the customer, that those things will be valuable, and then show that they were, because it would be easier to implement further improvements.
Thank you. And we have a few words of appreciation in our chat, saying thank you to our speaker. And let's conclude this Q&A part with the last question. Is optimizing testing the responsibility of leads or managers, or should all team members be involved?
I think that it should be a matter of a mindset. No matter you are already a QA lead or QA manager, or just a newcomer who just joined, and you have 3 months of experience, it's always good to have a mindset. How can you do your own something in order to improve? Because with this mindset, you will be very successful in your professional career path, because there is no certain point when you don't suggest any improvements, and then you become a lead, and from this point you start introducing some improvements. It's better to start from the very beginning, and the difference is that when you're a lead, you do it like on your own, but and say to your team members, let's discuss, let's embrace this approach. And if you're having lack of experience, you need to persuade. Maybe you have to be well, you have a less authority, but as a lead, for example, as a lead, I really like people who comes to me and say, hey, I see that we can improve this and this and this. I like this mindset, and I deeply encourage, uh, take your responsibility, no matter you are already a leader or manager, or you're on this path to this position if you want to. That's the answer.
Yeah, thank you, Olga. I think it's a big fact to have a test lead who encourages you and supports in being proactive. And yeah, it's really we appreciate it. And as we come to the end of today's Tech Talk on optimizing testing processes to improve software quality, I want to say a big thank you to our speaker, Olga. Your experience and tips have given us valuable ideas to improve our software quality, and we appreciate all the hard work and time you put into preparing this talk and sharing your insights with us. And I also want to encourage everyone to show their appreciation by saying thank you in the comment section and sending virtual badges via VR Community or Heroes portal to recognize our speaker and your effort. Your feedback is important and appreciated. So, thank you again and see you on the next event. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you.